training. Project 2025. So what is Project 2025? It's basically like a consortium of conservative neoliberal think tanks who are rooted in anti-communist, paranoia that these cultural Marxists, which is the word being thrown around now, is they've infiltrated our institutions. Of course, this is nothing new. This goes back to the, Cold War, the beginnings of the Cold War, even before then. And we can echo the same sentiments in the Powell Memo of 1973, which was highly influential. We won't go into that, but that's another. But there's always these neoliberal think tanks that get together, express their fear and paranoia for these cultural Marxists who have infiltrated our institutions, and we must fight back the rising tide. Because, you just listen to the language of this, which we'll get into in just a second. They got money and professionals. Yeah, you're right. They got all the resources. But we've got the vision. Cultural Bolshevism, that's right. That's like literally right out of Hitler's playbook. So, yeah, if I could just wrap up Project 2025, like, they, when a president-elect, an incoming administration takes power, there's all these policies and plans that have already been thought about, and gamed out how they're going to implement these policies on for every federal branch of the government. The Department of Homeland Security, Department of Transportation is what we're going to do for that, every facet. So this, to me, is it's a playbook for the incoming administration. Like, this is what we want to see happen. We've got together all these different political intellectuals types, really just neoliberal types that authored these policy documents. Of course, you heard Trump, I don't know if this is real or not. I saw in a post that he was trying to distance himself from Project 2025. He says says something like, "I wish them luck, but I disagree with a lot of their things. Some of their stances are completely ridiculous, but I wish them well. In other words, I hope they succeed, but I also disagree with them." I guess it's sort of a dog whistle, in my estimation. Stand back and stand by. That's right. We're waiting in the wings. As soon as the next incoming conservative administration takes power, we've got all this shit that they need to study up on, and we need to implement it like this. So it is not enough for conservatives to win elections. Now, this is important. Okay, if you redress this with leftist ideals and principles and working class values and principles, I think that's a good thing, because it's not enough to just punch a hole, as Vincent Bevins taught us. Well, I don't know if he taught us, but he repeated the information that he learned in his book. It's not enough to punch holes into the establishment. Of course, we want to lay some haymakers on capitalism. Of course, we want to attack when the system is weak. But we also need to, have a plan of, if that void happens, who's going to fill it? Who's waiting in the wings? There is no such thing as a power vacuum. People are always waiting to take power. And remember that revolutions are in certain times. A lot of different, it could have started as one thing. Think of the free fare movement, right, that we learned about. Sorry, I keep touching on the If We Burn book, but it's fresh in my mind. It started around a price hike for public transportation, but then suddenly, it was about police brutality because it escalated, and then now you got all these other different groups involved. It sort of changes, it evolves over time, and sometimes you can't really, control it, but maybe you can control it, if you have the theory behind. It's not enough for conservatives to win elections. If we're going to rescue the country from the grip of the radical left, think about that. Think about what they just assumed. Their whole presumption on Project 2025 is that we are already in the grip of the radical left. We need to rescue the country. Now, think about your world view. If you're carrying around that world view as a citizen in the United States, you're in fear of the radical left. You think you've been gripped by the radical left, and it's time to rescue the country. It's just absolutely absurd. What is the radical left? Well, according to conservatives in Project 2025, Joe Biden is the radical left. Joe Biden, you've heard Trump call Joe Biden a Marxist. This is the Overton window. This is the narrow window of acceptable thought. We're doomed if we think that Joe Biden represents the radical left. absolutely absurd, especially given the fact that we are living in a world where we're dominated by corporations and the corporate class. So if we are going to rescue the country from the grip of the radical left, we need both a governing agenda and the right people in place. Now that's true. If you want to take power, you need a governing agenda and you need the right people in place. And they make a point that personnel is policy, or policy is personnel. You have to get the right people. That is your policy, because they are the ones that are actually materially carrying it out, right? So we need both a governing agenda and the right people in place, ready to carry this agenda out on day one of the next conservative administration. And I like how they sort of borrow tactic out of Trump's playbook, I guess, which is to say they capitalize random words. Okay, radical left is capitalized. Conservative administration is capitalized. Day one is capitalized. That's a Trump thing, right? Customary from his tweets. So they're sort of speaking that same style. This is the goal of the 2025 presidential transition project. The project will build on 4 pillars that will collectively pave the way for an effective conservative administration. So there's 4 pillars. And what is the goal? It's to rescue the country from the grip of the radical left and to implement this broad strategy and governing agenda. And the project is built on 4 pillars. Okay, well, what are the 4 pillars? We can learn more about that. So the actions here, let's get about Project 2025, building now for a conservative victory through policy, personnel, and training. The actions of liberal politicians in Washington have created a desperate need. Okay, the actions of liberal politicians in Washington have created a desperate need and unique opportunity for conservatives to start undoing the damage the left has wrought and build a better country for all Americans in 2025. So the actions of liberal politicians in Washington have created a desperate need and a unique opportunity for conservatives to start undoing the damage the left has wrought. It is not enough for conservatives to win elections. If we are going to rescue the country from the grip of the there it is again. Okay, so this is just a repeat. So Project 2025 is a presidential transition project. Project will be built on 4 pillars that will collectively pave the way for an effective conservative administration. A policy agenda, personnel training, and a 180-day playbook. For every day, 180 days, they've got it all mapped out. They already know what they're going to do. 180 days, it's half the year in advance. The project is the effort of a broad coalition of conservative organizations that have come together to ensure a successful administration begins in January 2025. So this is the broad coalition. Of course, the broad coalition of conservative organizations are all, they have a list of them. It's all like neoliberal think tanks. With the right conservative policy recommendations and properly vetted and trained personnel to implement them, we will take back our government. Who's we in this case? Who's we? We will take back our government. From who and, for who? Do you think that Project 2025 represents regular working class Americans? Who's this we? It's this whole political theater, like they've actually lost control. Do you think BlackRock cares if it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump, etc., etc.? What's interesting is that they call it cultural Marxists. They call us cultural Marxists, when Marx and Marxism was chiefly concerned with class. I'd rather you call me a class reductionist. Like, tell me you don't know what fucking Marxism is without telling me. But yeah, we're just going to add cultural on top. Because, no, we want to fight they're cultural. Don't look at class. It's all culture. They're cultural Marxists. The 2025 Presidential Transition Project is being organized by the Heritage Foundation and builds off Heritage's long-standing mandate for leadership. So yeah, the Heritage Foundation in the 80s, this is sort of a continuation of already pre-established paradigms in the political lexicon. I sort of said that at the outset when I was talking about Project 2025 is, I mentioned the Powell Memo of 1973. Not the same, it's not obviously the same scope, but the same sentiment, the same leftist sentiment, fear, paranoia. But the Reagan administration in 1980, the Heritage Foundation, which is another conservative think tank, issued the mandate for leadership, and that was sort of the same scope as Project 25. It's the same style of a document as Project 2025. which has been highly influential for presidential administrations since the Reagan era. Most recently, the Trump administration relied heavily on Heritage's mandate for policy guidance, embracing nearly two-thirds of Heritage's proposals within just 1 year in office. I have a link to that. So the Trump administration embraces Heritage Foundation policy recommendations. Paul Dans, former chief of staff at the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, during the Trump administration, serves as the director of the 2025 Presidential Transition Project. So the director of Project 2025, Paul Dans, is the former chief of staff at the Office of Personnel Management during the Trump administration. I feel like Jordan Peterson coined that term, cultural Marxism. We could join the team, guys. Ooh. Should we troll Project 2025? Maybe we create an email. Create a new email. Just basically be a poser. I need to come up with a new email. Just overload their database, yeah. Ben.Shapiro at PalestinianTears.org. That's funny. This is their fucking manifesto, okay? This book is an invitation for you, the reader, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, and Miss Smith, all three. I wish the government was run by Marxists, I know. This book is an invitation to come to Washington or support those who can. Our goal is to assemble an army of aligned, vetted, trained, prepared conservatives. Go to work on day one to deconstruct the administrative state. The administrative state? What are you talking about? Deconstruct the administrative state? You own all of these institutions. What are you trying to deconstruct? It's already made in your image. This book is the product of more than 400 scholars and policy experts from across the conservative movement and around the country. Contributors include former elected officials, world-renowned economists, and veterans from 4 presidential administrations. There's that administrations word capitalized for some weird reason, Trumpism. This is an agenda prepared by and for conservatives who will be ready on day one of the next administration to save our country. Country needs to be saved, man. We're trying to save this country, brother. The Heritage Foundation is once again facilitating this work, as we understood by, obviously it's called the same thing, Mandate for Leadership. But as our dozens of partners and hundreds of authors will attest, this book is the work of the entire conservative movement. The next conservative president will enter office on January 20th, 2025 with a simple choice: greatness or failure. Well, if you outline it like that, I mean, of course we got to go with your program here. We want to choose greatness. Duh. The next conservative president will enter. That's very prescient words there. Of course, even if it is Joe Biden or Donald Trump, that's still a conservative president. So yeah, I would have to agree. Every president is conservative, whether they have a D next to their name or an R. It will be a daunting test, but no more so than every other generation of Americans has faced and passed. That's right. We have a storied past. We've always come out on top. The conservative promise represents the best effort of the conservative movement in 2023 and the next conservative president's last opportunity to save our republic. Gotta save our republic, man. Come on. You know this. So here it is. The whole fucking thing. Look at this. The whole table of contents. Acknowledgements. Section 1, taking the reins of government. Section 2, the common defense. I mean, this is some fucking batshit crazy people. Section 3, the general warfare. Department of Agriculture, Education, Energy, Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Housing and Urban Development. This is all just rich corporate elites trying to make sure that they, continue their unremitting control of the U.S. government, gut all of the agencies of their resources so that the people are perpetually disenfranchised. Section 4, the economy. The case for free trade. Oh, really? Another case for free trade. That's interesting. Export-import banks should be abolished. I mean, that's ironically based. Okay, so you get this whole big table of contents, yada, yada, yada. This is the advisory board, okay? Listen to the names of these. These are all, to me, they're all just conservative think tanks. Alabama. I once met a French person that said Alabama. They didn't know how to pronounce Alabama. It's kind of funny. Alabama Policy Institute, Alliance Defending Freedom, American Compass, the Americans Conservative, America First Legal Foundation, So look at all these. Where are our leftist institutions? Where's our consortium advisory board of our cultural Marxist institutions, right? Why are we not getting together writing a fucking manifesto? It's time for a new manifesto. Shit's wild. A note on Project 2025. We want you. Me? That's awfully thoughtful. The 2025 Presidential Transition Project is the conservative movement's unified effort to be ready for the next conservative administration to govern at 12 noon, January 20th, 2025. Welcome to the mission. Welcome, comrade. It'd be funny if he said, welcome, comrade, to the mission. By opening this book, you are now part of it. Indeed, one set of eyes reading these passages will be those of the 47th President of the United States, and we hope every other reader will join in making the incoming administration a success. History teaches that a president's power to implement an agenda is at its apex during the administration's opening days. To execute requires a well-conceived, coordinated, unified plan and a trained and committed cadre of personnel to implement it. In recent election cycles, presidential candidates normally began transitioning. Conservative candidates transitioned? I thought they were against all that. I can't believe they put the word transition in this manifesto. That seems very sus. The federal government's complexity and growth advance at a seemingly logarithmic rate every 4 years. For conservatives to have a fighting chance to take on the administrative state and reform our federal government, the work must start now. The entirety of this effort is to support the next conservative president, whoever he or she may be. In the winter of 1980, the fledging... Oh, we have a typo. Oh, that's nice. Very, 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 very professional of you. Project 2025. In your forward, you can't even fucking spell fledgling right? Fucking idiots. In the winter of 1980, the fledging Heritage Foundation handed to President-elect Ronald Reagan the inaugural mandate for leadership. It was the inaugural one, the first of ever. Wow. This collective work by conservative thought leaders and former government hands, most of whom were not part of Heritage, set out policy prescriptions. That's the word we need. It's policy prescriptions. Agency by agency, that's right, for the incoming president. Policy prescriptions, agency by agency, for the incoming president. You could say that's one of the pillars of Project 2025. Of course, there's 4, right? But I think we're reading the policy prescriptions, agency by agency. This book literally put the conservative movement and Reagan on the same page, and the revolution that followed might never have been. Save for this band of committed and volunteer, this ragtag bunch, just this ragtag bunch of patriots. They didn't have uniforms. Of course, not all heroes wear capes. Some are just committed and volunteer activists. This book literally put the conservative movement and Reagan on the same page. And the revolution, remember, it's the Reagan Revolution, okay? If we want to know anything about Reagan, we just want to think about, it was a revolution. Revolutionary times when Reagan took office. What a revolution. Thank God he got rid of all those poor black people. Whew, that was the revolution. The ragtag band of billionaires, that's right. It's not 1980. In 2023, the game has changed. This is crazy to me. The long march of cultural Marxism through our institutions has come to pass. It's gotta be true, right? That's got to be true. Which institutions have been infiltrated by the long march of cultural Marxism? They don't say. But I guess it's the federal government, right? The federal government is a behemoth weaponized against American citizens and conservative values. Because remember, American citizens and conservative values are synonymous. They're the same thing. Now, the first half of this, I would have to agree. The federal government is a behemoth weaponized against American citizens by the people that wrote this manifesto and the people that they represent, by the same class of people that they represent. Methinks the call comes from inside the home. Let's not forget, freedom and liberty are under siege as never before. That's right. We gotta go back. We gotta make America great again. So that's pretty funny, huh? The task at hand to reverse this tide and restore our republic to its original moorings is too great for any one conservative policy shop to spearhead. That's so true. We need the whole consortium. Remember, what is the tide? The task at hand to reverse this tide, the tide of cultural Marxism. We have to restore our republic. It's likened to a ship that is unmoored. We're heading towards disaster. We need more conservatives. We need more action. We need more free trade. We need to give corporations more power. If there's one problem with the government, is that it's not letting the free market go unfettered. Remember that the government is gross because it's trying to help poor people. Because if you're a failure, that's on you, and that has nothing to do with the free market. Government bad, capitalism good. If only government wasn't such a bummer. Project 2025 is more than 50 of the nation's leading conservative organizations joining forces to prepare and seize the day. Oh, I thought they were almost going to say seize the means. The axiom goes, personnel is policy, and we need a new generation of Americans to answer the call and come to serve. Okay, here's the four. Finally, we get to the four pillars. The pillar one is this volume, like I said. This volume is pillar one. It puts in one place a consensus view of how major federal agencies must be governed, and where disagreement exists, brackets out these differences for the next president to choose a path. Pillar 2 is a personnel database that allows candidates to build their own professional profiles and our coalition members to review and voice their recommendations. So it's sort of like an online database where people that are wanting to be a part of this project, want to have leadership roles in this project, will submit their profiles, and the members of the coalition will review them and then promote who they want to promote. These recommendations will then be collated, which is to say comprised or compiled or consolidated and shared with the president-elect's team. So it's like an Amazon sortation center. It's like we're going to sort it all out so that when it gets into the hands of the president, he's already got a good vetted list to choose from. That's just LinkedIn, dorks, exactly. Pillar number 3 is the Presidential Administration Academy. So this is your re-education camp. It's an online educational system taught by experts from our coalition for the newcomer. This will explain how the government functions and how to function in the government. Is an online class. Pillar 2 is a personnel database. Pillar 1 is this volume. All 3 material examples of how they're going to achieve their goals. In Pillar 4 is the playbook. We are forming agency teams and drafting transition plans to move out upon the president's utterance of, "So help me God." Okay, so Paul Dans is the director of Project 2025. This guy was, remember, the former chief of staff for the Office of Personnel Management under the Trump administration. So he knows a thing or two about hand-picking the right people and policy as personnel. He's all gung-ho about all this shit. Fuck him. So remember, the United States and the conservative movement, once again, same thing. American people, conservative values, same thing. The United States, the conservative movement, same thing. What is the conservative movement? It's the movement of corporations. It's neoliberal economics. It's racist as well, tied in there neatly. But conservative, what does that boil down to? That just means the rights of corporations to me. Conservative movement, I mean, I just feel like it's big business. I don't think it has anything to do with the United States. What is the United States? What is a nation? Of course, we know that what is Stalin's definition of nation? We're going way back. A nation is a historically constituted, stable community of people formed on the basis of a common language, territory, economic life, and psychological makeup manifested in a common culture. Did you remember that from our reading? I hope you did. So the United States and the conservative movement were in dire straits. At that moment of acute vulnerability and division, we found ourselves besieged by existential adversaries, foreign and domestic. Sounds like, who wrote this? Benjamin Netanyahu? Who in their right mind believes that the conservative movement were victims? So the Washington establishment betrayed the United States and the conservative movement. And the conservative movement and the United States whatever that means, were internally splintered and strategically adrift. We were not only vulnerable, we were besieged by existential adversaries, foreign and domestic. We're speaking of no other than cultural Marxists. Sounds like Hitler. It really does sound like Hitler. This is a Hitler speech. China, the looming threat of China. Now, as then, our political class has been discredited by wholesale dishonesty and corruption. Look at America under the ruling and cultural elite today. The cultural elite. What the fuck does that mean? Inflation is ravaging family budgets. Based. Drug overdose deaths continue to escalate, and children suffer the toxic normalization of transgenderism with drag queens and pornography invading their school libraries. Transgendered drag queens are on the rise, folks. They're the cultural elites of today. You should be very scared of all those transgendered drag queens, because they're taking America by storm. Have you seen that RuPaul show? That's just the beginning. Anytime I see cultural to describe something, like, what? Yeah, drag queens are usually not trans. The common theme of conservatives painting themselves out once again to be the biggest victims of society, while single-handedly being the most powerful. Their affinity to be the victim, to be attacked, and to blame the most marginalized, vulnerable members of society for their very real consequences of their own policy decisions is, absolutely ridiculous.
Nixon ordered Cambodian genocide. Sent cruise missiles to Sudan, people died. Gave the orders to do drone strikes. Invaded Nicaragua in '85.